Okay, thanks. Good afternoon. Welcome everybody to this session on digitalization for development, organized by the Permanent Representation of the Netherlands in Geneva. My name is Natasja van der Geest. I'm based in The Hague, the MFA, and I'm very honored to be here with such an excellent panel to host a discussion on e-commerce. Welcome to the people in the room and to the people online. We've got a nice number of participants already. I first want to introduce the topic of the session that I will moderate for the coming hour. And then I will introduce the panelists to you. Today we will talk about the importance of e-commerce that has grown immensely over the past decade. The COVID-19 pandemic has only given further impetus to these developments. Although some existing WTO rules apply to digital trade, more needs to be done to make WTO rules fit for the 21st century trade. During this session, we will discuss the concrete benefits that a joint statement initiative on e-commerce may provide for entrepreneurs, in particular for micro and small and medium entrepreneurs in developing countries. We will have 4 panelists today, who I will give the floor for 6 minutes to give a brief introduction on the topic of today, the digitalization for development. In 15 minutes, we will have a poll ready for you. So I hope you will be online so you can participate to the poll. And after the poll, we will of course reflect on the results. Our first panelist is Crispin Conroy. Mr. Conroy is the permanent observer of the International Chamber of Commerce to the United Nations office in Geneva. He previously served as a career diplomat with the Australian government for over 25 years. Mr. Conroy, welcome. Can you please share with us your thoughts on opportunities for business, particular MSMEs in developing countries? The floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you to the Permanent Representation of the Kingdom of the Netherlands in Geneva for extending this invitation to speak on this important topic of digitalization for development. My name is Crispin Conroy, and I'm the Geneva representative of the International Chamber of Commerce. For those of you who don't know ICC, we are the global business organization, the institutional representative of over 45 million companies, small, medium, and large, and micro, in over 110 countries in every region of the world. And more than 60% of our representation is in the developing world. We are also the only business organization with permanent observer status at the United Nations. COVID-19 has upended the normal course of business across the global real economy, resulting in the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s. A collapse in activity of such magnitude and speed, unlike anything in living memory, and whose consequences remain to be seen. Against this economic shock, e-commerce has proved to be a lifeline for millions of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, MSMEs, hard hit by prolonged quarantines, and digital trade has ensured continued access to goods and services for millions of people around the globe. As communities socially distanced to flatten the curve, contactless payments enabled safe, COVID-free transactions. Brick and mortar retailers rapidly moved to sell their wares online, powered by a vibrant ecosystem of software as service providers. Citizens used social media to maintain connection with friends and loved ones across the globe, and e-commerce marketplaces provided consumers with safety, choice, and convenience. But this scenario was not an experience shared by all nations. In the first quarter of 2020, for example, quarterly internet growth was 12.8% higher in high-income countries, 7.5% higher in emerging economies, but only 1.3% higher in low to lower middle income countries. Indeed, many challenges continue to inhibit developing countries and their businesses in realizing the benefits of digital transformation and the digital economy. I look forward to hearing some of the specific challenges facing digital entrepreneurs from our other panelists. Excuse me. And of course, many communities without access to digital services suffered disproportionately. Discussions within the ICC network have shown us that there is no single bridge to traverse the digital divide. no one instrument or discipline, no national champion or sector that, if given the right incentives or stimulus, will enable digital transformation. Rather, we believe a suite of measures is required, including an increase in ICT infrastructure investment and more affordable ICT services, open and effective payment networks, effective institutions, improved digital literacy and skills training, and enabling policy frameworks and regulations for digital innovation. As we're in the WTO, and this has been a key focus of ICC and the business community within this organization, I'd like to focus briefly today on the latter, specifically the WTO e-commerce joint statement initiative. Before doing so, however, let me refer to the position paper launched yesterday at the public forum by ICC Secretary General John Denton on global priorities for the WTO in the lead up to MC12. I'd be very happy to share this paper as it contains a section on trade and the digital economy. Many of these measures I just mentioned are being advanced within the e-commerce JSI, which is why, in ICC's view, the ability of the digital economy and digitally enabled trade to drive the global economic recovery, promote inclusive economic growth, and build resilience for the future would be greatly enhanced by a high standard agreement on the trade-related aspects of e-commerce. Excuse me. For ICC, the e-commerce joint statement initiative presents an opportunity to focus on four key deliverables, which we believe would benefit businesses from all over the world. Certainly, this is the feedback from our network. The first relates to market access and connectivity. Our businesses need common rules to ensure open, non-discriminatory access to digital and digitally enabled markets that support competition and enable the development of vibrant ecosystems to support the growth of digitally enhanced trade and contribute to the resilience of global supply chains. The global use of ICT applications and e-commerce must also be supported by better conditions of deployment and the adoption of very high capacity networks. Secondly, cross-border data flows. Again, our businesses support a permanent prohibition on customs duties and discriminatory tariffs for digitally supplied products and electronic transmissions to ensure that customs duties do not impede the flow of data, communications, music, video, software, and games. We do not either support the localization of data rules, including for storage or processing. Thirdly, trade facilitation. Our businesses need disciplines building on the trade facilitation agreement to enable simplified processing of low-value shipments. This should include the establishment of a commercially meaningful baseline de minimis threshold for low-value, low-risk goods and a separate threshold for informal clearance of goods valued above the de minimis threshold, but below what is required for formal clearance. And fourthly, trust and security. Our businesses need commitments on cross-border consumer protection standards, data protection standards, and dispute settlement to strengthen consumer trust and confidence in cross-border commerce, including a commitment from each party to have a data protection framework in law that is effective and transparent in operation and embodies the minimum best practice standards. Such a framework would help ensure legal certainty for businesses and also support consumers in cross-border business-to-consumer e-commerce. In addition, let me stress ICC's support for capacity building and skills training. We look forward to continue collaborating with the relevant global and regional organizations to significantly scale up and enhance coordination of existing trade-related capacity building programs, to expand connectivity, bridge digital divides, and digitally enabled market access, including targeted capacity building programs for MSMEs in developing countries looking to expand through e-commerce. ICC is already playing its part, including through programs in our African network on digitalizing SMEs and through our expanding network of centers of entrepreneurship in Africa, Latin America, and Asia, and elsewhere. And we're planning to do more in collaboration with partners like ITC and, of course, UNCTAD, and in the context of our support for the African Continental Free Trade Area. Let me conclude by saying that there is so much more to be done to scale up digitalization everywhere, especially in developing economies. and we must all work together on a range of measures. In the WTO context, and with the right mix of high standard regulatory principles and trade disciplines, we believe the e-commerce JSI can contribute to this important cause for all countries and businesses of all size. As ICC stands ready to advocate for such policies, true to our mission to enable business worldwide to secure peace, prosperity, and opportunity for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Crispin, for your good introduction of the theme. I want to mention that there's a Q&A. There's ample time for Q&A after the presentations of the panelists. So please, you can already send your question through the Q&A option in the app. I hope you're able to do that, to share your questions with us. The second panelist is Ms. Sonal Jindal. Sonal Jindal is founder and promoter of Medusa, a supply chain management company in global trade. She's bridging the gap between international buyers and Indian sellers. She's web signatory with UN Women and UN Global Compact. She's the recipient of many awards, including the National Excellent Award as Woman Entrepreneur in SMEs India. Welcome, Ms. Jindal. Can you share with us your personal experience and opportunities of digital trade during the COVID pandemic?
Sure. Thank you, WTO, for giving me an opportunity to speak as a panelist on today's session. I am Sonal Jindal, a businesswoman from India. I would like to share a journey of my company from traditional business to digital transformation. I entered into global trade about 5 years back in 2016. My company, Medusa Exim, as Natasha told, is a supply chain management company, and we are into exports and imports of agro, pharmaceutical, mines, apparels, and handloom products. We work with about 1,000 vendors who are SMEs and MSMEs from India and subcontinent. Before COVID-19, we were only into apparel segment. Pre-COVID, we were working in a traditional way. As my role in the company was business development, I was traveling the globe, attending physical trade shows, B2B shows from
I have a hiccup. So now I think the connection is, we have problems with the connection. Sonal, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, now the line seems to be better. Please continue.
Okay. So as my role in my company was business development, I was traveling the globe, attending physical trade shows from Magic in Vegas to Pitti in Florence, meeting my clients in their headquarters, in their countries. I was traveling 3 continents in a week. March 7th, 2020, I took my last international flight back home. We had invested big money overseas. I had a business development office and a team in Milan, Italy. As we all know, the most affected country in the first phase of COVID was Italy, and I had no idea what I'm going to do. But like we all know, every disaster brings an opportunity. Being an optimistic person, I started to find that opportunity. I started brainstorming. I started thinking. In February 2020, I had to give my view on Indian Union budget, and I was introduced to Zoom platform. I spoke to my colleagues about this platform and they had no idea what Zoom was. But to my surprise, my colleagues started sending me Zoom meeting links by April 2020. In 2 months, I could see a shift in digital technology and the way people were using these virtual platforms. The entire world knew about the Zoom and Google Meet and everything. Today at WTO, our hybrid session is also on Zoom. So in April, I knew what is the opportunity for me. The opportunity is digital. And I decided to upskill myself and join distance learning 9-month post-graduation diploma with digital business with Columbia Business School and MIT Salon. The course started in June 2020 and ended in February 2021. And in 1 year, June 2020, I reinvented my company. I did 4 more segments. Today, all my business is digital and is on B2B e-commerce digital platforms. I am not traveling, but still working in global trade, still working in global marketplace. I have expanded my business from one segment. I have entered into four new segments. I'm experimenting frugal ways of doing remote business. All this I could do because of the new way of thinking. I want to share something which is mentioned by the professor David Roger from Columbia Business School in his book, The Digital Transformation Playbook, looking at history back in the Industrial Revolution, looking at an important shift with the rise of electrification. So in the first stage of Industrial Revolution, our factories were being built on a model called line shaft, as the factories were running on water power and later coal power. Around the beginning of 20th century came electrification, and all of a sudden you had a capacity and capability of a very different power source, which could be located anywhere and which remove all these constraints. But the interesting thing was that this was a real challenge for the companies that were already uh, in the business and had the factories. They didn't know how to think in this new way. They were still designing their factories in the same old way, which were run on water and coal, even though now they had electricity. So it was actually up to the electrical companies. These were the startups in that era. These were new small businesses starting this whole new technology, the electrification. They were the evangelists. They sent their own trainers for free to factories and say, we will spend time bringing electric motors, work with you, figure out how you might change the way you operate, change the way of thinking as a business. And that was what led to the real breakthrough in factory design in the second stage of the revolution. It wasn't that technology alone was not enough. We had to learn new ways of thinking. So in the era of digitalization, I think we have to start thinking the new ways. I would like to share some points for digital transformation. The first point, understand and evaluate digital technology. Second, identify what works for you. Third, understand transformation and tools of digital strategy. Fourth, harness big data as a strategic asset. Fifth, embrace innovation and experimentation in the digital world. We are living in the digital world. There is technology, there is digitalization, and digital transformation has yet to happen. We as individuals have adopted digitalization, but as companies, as industries, as SMEs, and as MSMEs, we still have to go through digital transformation. It is more about understanding what's going on very broadly in the market, understanding how the world is changing, and what the different strategic opportunities are there that were available to you and in the industry that may have not been possible just a year ago. Digital strategy is really more about organizational leadership mindset. We as companies have to transform with using right digital technology, doing experimentation, finding innovative ideas which work for you with this digital transformation. I can confidently say that COVID-19 has led us to digital revolution. And now it is up to us that how we are going to transform. And with this transformation, the breakthrough will happen, and we will definitely emerge as an ideal digital world. Thank you. I'm done speaking.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sonal, for sharing your experiences as an entrepreneur in India and how you make use of how you expanded your business in this COVID pandemic time, which is quite a challenge, I think. Thank you so much. I want to go to the poll. I hope you're all, you have the poll ready in front of you. We have 4 questions. The first question is, looking at e-commerce sales, what captures highest value? People are, I think, are still filling out the poll. And people are changing their minds. Okay. The right answer, I hear already from the panelists who would say they think they have the right answer, but the right answer is A, B2B. And most people in the audience have also, of the participants have also filled this out. I'll go to the next question. 90% of market capitalization value of the world's largest digital platforms are based in. Can you all see the question? Okay, I think there was an easy one. United States and China, 91%. That's indeed the right answer. I go to the next question. Internet connectivity is key to enter digital markets. What percentage of the population in least developed countries are connected to the internet? This one is more difficult. If I see people changing between answer number 3 and 4. The right answer, I think everyone has finished filling this out. Yes, the right answer is 4, it's 20%. Go to the last question. Question number 4. What percentage of countries worldwide have adopted consumer protection laws? I think you can all see the different options on the screen. This is also a more difficult question. The right answer is C. 56% of countries worldwide have adopted consumer protection laws. That covers e-commerce. Well, that's a good bridge for the next speaker, which is Torbjorn Frederickson. I think many of the questions also have come forward in the latest publication of UNCTAD on the digital economy. Mr. Frederickson is head of the e-commerce and digital economy branch at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. He's responsible for this report, the Digital Economy Report 2021, that was published earlier this week. Welcome, Mr. Frederickson. It's nice to have you here on the panel next to me and not online. The floor is yours to present us the main challenges for developing countries and their business with regard to cross-border data flows and development, the central theme of the Digital Economy Report.
All right. Maybe if I may, I would like to perhaps start with some more specific links to the question of the digital trade and entrepreneurs here, because in addition to the Digital Economy Report that we rightly launched this week, we are also about to release some numbers. I thought I could give you some previews of numbers that are coming up in the coming weeks. Digital trade is often referred to here in this context, and for the latest understanding of digital trade, it basically involves two things. One is any goods and services that are ordered online, which is e-commerce, and anything that is digitally delivered over remote electronic networks, which is what we call ICT-enabled services or digitally delivered services. And what is interesting to see that both these dimensions of digital trade has seen a significant increase during the pandemic, which has of course also led to more data being generated and flowing across the world. But our latest estimates for 2020 suggest that online retail sales as a share of total retail sales rose from 14% in 2018 to 16% in 2019 and to 19% in 2020, which is a very rapid increase over a very short time period. We have also seen that e-commerce has increased across the world in rich and poor countries. However, when we look at cross-border e-commerce, the picture looks quite different. Intercontinental and also intra-regional e-commerce concerned with goods has been adversely affected by the restrictions on cross-border transit imposed by governments to constrain the virus transmission, and by reductions in transport capacity. Our data on trade in digitally delivered services for 2020, which are soon to be released, by contrast, show that such services have been more resilient than other kinds of services in trade. Between 2019 and 2020, the share of digitally delivered services in total services export surged from 52% to 64%, meaning 2/3 of all trade that was undertaken in 2020 was potentially possible to deliver digitally. However, in the least developed countries and in countries in Africa, they did not experience such a significant increase. So I think this also illustrates the lower capacity in many countries to actually capitalize on the opportunities that digitalization offers. And if we look at small businesses in developing countries, we did quite a lot of research last year to see what has happened with small businesses in countries where we had undertaken e-trade readiness assessments. And these are mainly least developed countries, but also other low-income countries. And in most of these countries, again, there was this surge in e-commerce, especially in demand from the consumers and from enterprises to buy more online. However, many smaller businesses struggled to take advantage of this surge in demand, typically due to weaknesses in the e-commerce ecosystem. You could also see very big difference between those companies that were providing third-party marketplaces for other companies to use and those that were simply selling on their own online. Whereas half of the businesses selling on their own products and services online saw a drop in monthly revenue due to the pandemic. The third-party marketplaces, they mostly saw a significant spike in sales. Factors that hamper the use of these digital solutions in these countries and by the smaller businesses included limited use of the internet in the population as a whole, lack of high-speed broadband connectivity, weak regulatory frameworks, and limited access to finance, and according to the businesses surveyed, insufficient attention by the governments to promote e-commerce or facilitate e-commerce. In fact, one of the most prioritized demands from the businesses that we surveyed was that the government need to put in place a well-defined national e-commerce strategy to be included in the overall efforts for COVID-19 recovery plans. I think what we have seen with this increased digitalization during the pandemic makes it even more urgent to look at ways to bring those countries that are trailing in the digital economy back to or up front to what's going on in the world. To build on some of the poll questions here, if you look at least developed countries, less than half of the countries have adopted legislation to protect consumers online and to protect data privacy. And in Africa, only about half of the countries have such laws in place. So this just shows the limited readiness that these countries have to protect consumers, to protect businesses, and to really participate in developing trust in online transactions. If we go to electronic transaction laws, which are also an issue for discussion in the JSI negotiations, only 1/3 of these countries lack this kind of legislation. Another area that we have spotted as being a key area for further development, and that's why I'm very happy for the composition of this panel, is the potential for women-led businesses in the digital economy. The gender divide in the digital economy is particularly pronounced in low-income countries, in Ldcs and in Africa. So it was against that background that we launched some time ago the E-Trade for Women initiative, which is financially supported by the Netherlands, and which now features 6 E-Trade for Women advocates from all parts of the developing world, including Clarisse, who is on here today in this panel. Now, finally, irrespective of whether developing countries are participating in the joint statement initiative negotiations or not, the formulation of adequate national regulatory frameworks to build digital capabilities should remain as an essential component of a broader national development agenda. Efforts are warranted to strengthen their capabilities to engage in e-commerce and to bridge the digital divide to help them take advantage of digitalization for sustainable development. But given the complexity of the policy challenge, covering a lot of policy areas, the speed of technological change, the need for effective collaboration across ministries as well as with other stakeholder groups, and the still low levels of e-commerce uptake, more international support will also be needed, including from UNCTAD. And if we look at the latest data from the OECD on aid for trade spending up to 2019, they show that the share allocated to ICT has increased in recent years, but they still amount to less than 3% of overall aid for trade spending. And we think that that is totally insufficient and inadequate for the needs that we have around the world at this stage. So if there's time, I'll get back to my digital economy report in my next intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Torbjorn, for highlighting several important aspects of the challenge we face in e-commerce. Our next panelist is Clarissa Iribagiza. I hope I pronounced it right. She's a computer scientist in Rwanda and the CEO and co-founder of the mobile technology company Hey Limited. She founded the company while still an undergraduate. Hi, Clarissa, you're online now. Thank you. Her company has grown to 2 million customers. She's an e-trade for women advocate. Torbjorn already mentioned it. Welcome, Ms. Iribagiza. Can you please share with us your personal experiences and on opportunities and challenges for female digital entrepreneurs in East Africa?
Yes, thank you so much for having me here today. It's an honor for me. I remember back in March of 2020, our team was undergoing an innovation bootcamp to identify opportunities for our next phase of growth when the pandemic hit. Suddenly, we saw more growth overnight than we had seen in the 11 years of our existence in digital trade. This was not how we imagined it, and we had not planned for it. So obviously, we were overwhelmed. Consumer growth skyrocketed as businesses scrambled to get online to meet this shifting demand. But fortunately, we had some infrastructure in place, such as digital payments like mobile money, where consumers could pay for goods and services using their mobile phones. Some had access to internet and smartphones, so they could transact entirely online. And we had enabled somewhat 200 businesses to be able to trade online in one way or another to deliver goods and services to their customers. And these are some of the opportunities that businesses continue to tap into in our market to meet consumer needs. We have seen an increase in awareness and appreciation for digital tools as a result of the pandemic. And for these SMEs today, they're able to reach their consumer demands using digital tools. And also some key stakeholders are starting to take e-commerce as one of the critical tools for economic recovery as a result post the pandemic. And I'll give an example for in our business. When the pandemic hit, we launched a post-harvest supply chain digital platform in agriculture that allowed 6,000 farmers to access high-value markets beyond their rural communities and overcome supply chain disruptions that had been brought about by the pandemic. Over 70% of our population are farmers, majority of who are women, so this was a significant impact for them. This would not have been possible prior to the pandemic, since it really brought about an appreciation for digital tools. There was a lot of awareness, and a lot of the infrastructure that was already in place was now pretty much utilized much more than it was before. This momentum has helped us to help us to address some of the challenges that I identified, which still exist in regards to digital entrepreneurship for women and also in my community. Today, we have more initiatives that are lowering barriers to entry into e-commerce for small businesses, with players like the private sector working collaboratively with the government and development partners to ensure that SMEs SMEs are not left behind in terms of the digital shift. Some of these challenges that I mentioned earlier, and I don't mean to sound like a broken record because I know that a lot of us have mentioned them, but Some of these challenges include high transaction costs in e-commerce, payments, and logistics. This is a huge barrier for a lot of players in the ecosystem in my community and in the region. Limited access to regional and global markets. There's still a lot of challenges there, and I think Torbjorn mentioned them, and I think that the speaker before that also did. Low consumer trust. This is still a challenge. Again, the lack of data privacy protection and also consumer protection laws plays a key role here, as well as the digital divide that still exists among lower income groups and rural communities. And again, this mostly affects women. But I'm optimistic that the prioritization of some of these issues through the WTO's joint statement initiative on e-commerce will bring about the much needed change. And I'm looking forward to an engaging conversation on this during our panel today, and also seeing the outcomes of this. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much, Clarissa, for sharing your experiences from Rwanda. I would like to open the floor for questions. Several questions have already come in. I don't know, for the participants in the room, they want to share their questions via the channel, that they want to raise hands here and pose their question. But perhaps if I may ask the first question to Clarissa, because it was quite an impressive number that you mentioned, that you reached, that you organize a platform for 6,000 producers in the agricultural sector. You said after, you mentioned after that high transaction costs poses one of the biggest challenges in this digital transformation age. Can you perhaps elaborate how these 6,000 producers that you mentioned, how they've overcome these high transaction costs, and how they could gain the trust of consumers to acquire the products?
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question, and it was one of the highest costs for us as a business. We initially, when we got started working with these farmers, for example, for them to receive payments, which we used mobile money in this case, we often had to top up what we called withdrawal fees, which is part of the transaction fees. And for a lot of these farmers, they insisted that we have to add this fee, which obviously we initially did not pass on to the consumer. This is something that we could not do. So as a business, we had to take on that cost, and we had to bear it for a couple of months when we launched this initiative. But over time, at least a huge percentage of the farmers that we're currently working with do not require for us to top up this fee, because they see a ready, consistent market for them. So this was one way for us to overcome this challenge, just the ability for them to see that there is a ready market, it's consistent. They don't have to worry about taking their produce to their traditional markets in their rural communities, but can serve high value markets. They did the math, they did the numbers, and it made sense for them to eliminate some of these charges for us, which was a huge win for our business. But we continue to try and build that trust. We still have to play a role as a company to sort of be, make that promise to the farmers and also to the consumers that the goods will be delivered. So sort of a middleman role. But as we continue to digitize the first mile, which is where the farmers are primarily operating, we do hope that we can continue to build more trust and they can transact directly with consumers. But as of now, we still have to play that role to ensure that the goods are delivered. If there's any damages, things like that, we do need to take care of that as a business.
Thank you, Clarissa, for elaborating on that. So now perhaps you also want to reflect on this, transaction costs. Is that also a problem in India?
Actually, like Clarissa said, that once you do your maths, I think going e-commerce is more economical, because like I also told that I was working in a traditional format and I was spending a lot of money. But once I went frugal and I went on e-commerce, I did my maths. I could figure out all, and the vendors which are working with SMEs and MSMEs, they also are calculating their cost, and somehow we are saving on our marketing, we are saving on documentation, we are saving a lot of money and time as well. So I would like to add something here, that the question you asked, the problem which we are facing, like Crispin said, the logistic is the problem which the entire world is facing, and India is facing it big time. We are spending about The shipment which used to go for about 1,000 USD from India to USA is going for 10,000 USD. And the government of India is right now finding its way to solve that problem. And 3-4 days back only, we launched a e-commerce portal with Federation of Indian Export Organization to handle that problem. And we are focused to handle that problem because like Crispin, Torbjorn, and Clarice said that we still have to figure out security, safety, digital wallets, documentations, and somewhere we have to monitor the price as well, because in the digital economy, in the e-commerce platform, the most expensive would be the logistics. And I think once we take care of the logistic parts, things would be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonal. Crispin, would you like to reflect on that as well? Are these signals that you also hear back from your members? You mentioned you have about 60 partnerships in Africa. Do you hear back the same signals?
Thank you. Yes, and first of all, let me say how impressed I am, particularly with our business panelists. Of course, I know Torbjorn, so I'm always impressed with him. But no, I know Sonal, so we've discussed her business, but listening to Clarissa, I think the challenges are significant, but also the opportunities are there. I think that some of the comments that she made were reflected in the 4 deliveries that we've requested from the negotiators in the joint statement initiative, including more affordable ICT services, of course, and the need for open and effective payments networks, which I think Clarissa responded to. It also reminded me of a panel that I participated in on during UNCTAD World MSME Day, not last year, but the year before. Very similar messaging coming from the 2 panelists there. Again, incredibly impressive women entrepreneurs, one from Ghana and the other from Uganda. Same sorts of challenges, but also amazing stories of overcoming those challenges and identifying the opportunities. So yeah, basically we're getting those messages, but it's another reason why we're so supportive of the JSI and why we see it as something that's a benefit to all companies, small, medium, and large, but particularly the sorts of the experiences that we hear through people like Clarissa.
Torbjorn, you want to reflect as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think what came out very clearly from Clarisse here and also from Sonal about the issues that they are facing and need to change. This kind of information is very important for the governments to have access to. And typically in such a fast moving environment, starting often from a very low level, it may not be readily available. And this is why I think it's so important to organize mechanisms for connecting the governments responsible for fostering an environment for e-commerce in their countries with the private sector, and not just the big players like the big telecom operators, which are well known in every country, but also the smaller companies. And typically, even though Clarisse's company has been very successful, it's still a relatively small player in the big picture in Rwanda. So when we go in and start looking at how we can improve the readiness of countries for e-commerce and e-trade, we do consultation processes. And this is often the first time that we see the ministries responsible for the key policy areas actually sitting at the same table with the smaller businesses in the area of e-commerce and the digital economy. And I think that's why it's still very, very important to keep an eye on the smaller businesses, because they are facing not only different challenges than the bigger ones, but they don't have normally the same access to policymakers as the big ones do. So kudos to you for organizing the panel with a focus on the SMEs.
Okay, there have a few questions have come in. The first question is from Richard Hill, who's asking, e-commerce has been working fine since the 1990s. Why are new rules needed, given that e-commerce works fine? That's an interesting question. Who wants to react first from the panel? I'm looking to my right-hand side. Sonal, Clarissa? Crispin, you go first.
Yeah, well, in a way, that's true. E-commerce has been working fine and has been delivering. But as I think I mentioned in some of my remarks, that's not consistent across the world. And I think Torbjorn's also highlighted that with some of the numbers that he gave us. So e-commerce is delivering, but it's not delivering consistently around the globe. And I think that's the focus of this panel, that we need to ensure frameworks that enable digital transformation. And just returning to some of the remarks from our panelists, I think Clarissa's comments on the need when we're developing these enabling frameworks to have all the stakeholders involved, government and business and civil society. So I guess, yes, it works, but that's probably our experience on this panel here in Geneva, but the objective is to make it work for everyone everywhere.
Torbjorn, you want to react as well?
No, thank you, Richard, for that question. It's a very valid question, in fact. It's sometimes we may not give sufficient attention to the problem formulation of what are we trying to solve through the negotiations. I think every country will have its own assessment of what they can get out from negotiations on e-commerce, whether it's in a bilateral format, the regional format, or in this case in the plurilateral format at WTO. But it is the case that not all WTO members have decided to join the joint statement initiative negotiations. So clearly the assessment of what they can get out of that and how they can contribute to it varies from country to country. And I think that partly reflects the situation that countries are at very, very different levels of readiness for e-commerce. And if you look at Africa, for instance, where relatively few African countries are participating in the JSI as of today, only one country, Morocco, has currently any bilateral free trade agreement that contains e-commerce provisions. That means that there is very little experience to date in negotiating these kind of provisions, and maybe difficult then to jump immediately to the global level of such negotiations. But clearly, it will be important to have a clear objective. What will be the ultimate vision once negotiations are concluded, and how will things be better once they are done? And of course, that will partly depend on what these agreements will include, and that's still a work in progress, as we know.
Clarissa, Sonal, do you want to add to this?
Yes, as an entrepreneur, I can add, since a very interesting question, since 1999, the e-commerce platforms are there. But entrepreneurs like me and Clarissa is in business from last so many years. I think she mentioned from last 11 years, she's in business, but she could see the growth during the COVID. And as an entrepreneur, as an SME, as an MSME, I could also see the benefits of e-commerce platform. But as a new trader on the trade, I face a lot of challenges. So when we talk about digitalization, as I mentioned before also, digitalization is here. But what WTO is doing is a part of a digital transformation. New set of rules are required, because as a trader on e-commerce platform, I am facing a lot of challenges every day, be it domestic market or be it international market. So I think this is required. We need new skill set. We need new documentation. We need new rules to run the business, because it's just a beginning. We have a long way to go. Like Torbjorn said, that we have a really, really long way to go. And I think, and I believe that every year we have to change the rules, and every year the bilateral trades have to mention their new treaties within the countries, because that is the need of an hour. In e-commerce is a need of an hour. Like you said that we both could have been in Geneva, but we are not in Geneva. We are sitting in our countries, and we are on a hybrid session. And if the documentation is not going to happen, how I'm gonna deal with my buyers, or how the seller is going to be authentic seller. So for that, I think documentation is required, and stricter documentation is required moving forward.
Thank you. Kalisa, do you want to add?
Yes, just to quickly build on what everyone has said previously, just two things. First of all, I'll give an example. Right now, we're setting up an e-commerce center where we are bringing in place new tools such as 3D printing, different sorts of packaging machines, and just these changes in technology alone require that we constantly revise what the rules are. So that's critical. The technology is changing, the digital technology, the ways we're manufacturing. So it's good to go back to the drawing board and see if the policies in place are still relevant. But also secondly, as speaking as an African, and Torbjorn rightly mentioned, we've not really been represented in a lot of these negotiations. So as we come on board with e-commerce, we do have a voice to add to the table, and it's an opportunity for us to do that. So those are the two key things that I wanted to highlight on why we need to change some of the existing rules. Thank you.
Thank you, Clarissa. The next question comes from Virginia Rigoni. It's for Ms. Jindal. Can you share your views how you have managed to build trust with new suppliers and choosing partners over online platform and during online meetings?
Yeah, sure. So these partners, the suppliers are the older partners only. So we are getting on them
So now we can't hear you very clear. This is a session on digitalization, and we have some digital
really
problems, it seems.
Can you hear me now? Hello.
Hi, I think now the line is better.
Yeah.
Can you please repeat,
Yes,
because we couldn't hear you clearly?
India. Yes. So like earlier question was that the e-commerce platforms are from 1999. So it is not very difficult to find the buyers. But yes, we have ECPC where we check the buyers, that are they authentic, if the leads are genuine or not genuine, because we have to do our due diligence. And for our suppliers, these suppliers are working with us for many years, and we are trying to get them also on the e-commerce platform. So there's nothing new which I'm doing. I'm just connecting the older suppliers to the newer buyers, which were already on the e-commerce platforms, and they are looking for the new supply chain. So right now, touch wood, I'm not facing any kind of a problem where I am facing problem with the supplier or a buyer.
Okay, thank you for your clear answer. The next question, what can a WTO do to increase affordable connectivity in developing countries? And I would like to hear from, we have another expert online, Nick Ashton Hart. Could you please respond to this question? Is he able to speak indeed? He's not in the room. If he's online, I don't know if he can be unmuted. Okay, we go to our next question. I hope Nick can come later online to respond to this question. The next question is from James Sibley. Would digitalization of trade documents be a help to SMEs in developing countries? Who would like to react first to this question?
I think it would be very interesting to hear from Sorana and Clarissa, but from our networks, we're hearing that extremely useful, that paperless trade is significantly helpful to not just SMEs, but also larger companies. So I'll leave it there and pass on to others who have more experience maybe.
Torbjorn?
I believe definitely so, that it's definitely a way to facilitate trade more easily and reduce the costs involved. But it's very important just to when you introduce this, that you also add capacity building to the smaller businesses that may not have been using this in the past, so that there is an element of that as well. But definitely it's a way to shorten the time for processing goods, especially goods in at customs and so on and so forth. So it's definitely something we strongly recommend.
Clarissa, Sonal, would you like to reflect on the digitalization of trade documents?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I would say it would be transformative for SMEs in developing countries. A lot of SMEs do not have the capacity to deal with a lot of the bureaucracies involved in, just being able to trade. And one of the projects that we've been working on is digitizing our export process, so an agriculture export platform for Rwanda. And just being able to get an export license is not something that a small SME is able to do, but through this platform, everything has been digitized, and it creates transparency and, of course, meritocracy. If the product is good, the consumers love it, they'll buy it. And this really is beyond transformative for an SME. So I think it's really critical to do that.
Thank you, Clarissa.
I think when we
Sonal?
talk about and I think when we talk about digital documentation, like Torbjorn said, that all the ports and all the customs, they are now equipped, digitalized, and I think to promote exports. And the process is so simple that in 7 to 10 days, your IEC is registered, your AD codes are registered, you can start trade. And again, I'm on a bad network. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. So I think Indian government, the Commerce Ministry is really helping the small SMEs to go digital, because digital is the way forward. And we have been given trainings at our promotion councils, and we have got good support from CHAs, from logistic companies, from our like I said, apparel promotion council in India is supporting apparel segment, factories to go digital, and Pharmexcel in pharmaceutical is helping pharma companies to go digital. So they are really supporting and moving forward the security part. That is the most important part we have to take care moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, very clear. Thank you, Sonal. Just heard that Mr. Ashton Hart is able to speak now and respond to the affordable connectivity question.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, I couldn't actually open the mic the last time. It's been a great session and really great panelists. The interesting thing is, so the ITU recently did a presentation, and they found that those countries that were WTO members tended to have higher rates of connectivity and lower cost of connectivity than countries that were not, but that this was much increased for those countries that had scheduled the telecommunications reference paper. We've heard about the connectivity challenges of LDCs, and I did some research last year that found that the average cost of a 1 megabit broadband connection was about 10% of average monthly income in an LDC context, which is almost 11 times higher than in a developed economy. So clearly we're not doing well enough to connect those who most need it, and almost half of humanity is still offline. So I think there's a good argument to be made that the JSI has a real opportunity here to look at what more, in terms of regulatory principles, are known to positively influence reducing the digital divide. I know some countries in the JSI are actually looking into this. And at the same time, there may not be time, but I know the ICC has made a major priority of the question of affordable connectivity in the digital divide. So we may not have time for Torbjorn for Crispin to say anything, but I think there is definitely an opportunity for trade. It has been shown conclusively that the commitments in the reference paper and the provisions of the telecom annex of GATS have profoundly been beneficial in reducing connectivity costs and increasing competition. And so we should look to see in the JSI if more can be done along those lines.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we have to wrap up. I didn't introduce Nick Ashton-Hart, but he's Geneva representative of the Digital Trade Network. It's difficult to wrap up such an inspiring session with a lot of information, a lot of points, good points that have been made up here from the panelists here in Geneva, but also from our panelists from Claris and Sonal in Rwanda and India. Perhaps very brief to summarize what I've heard is that the joint statement initiative is very much welcomed, but there's still a lot of work to do, especially to close the gap in the digital divide. I want to thank our panelists very much for their excellent contributions, and we hope to see you soon in another opportunity. Thank you also for the panelists, for the participants for your good questions. Thank you.